Hello and welcome back everyone. Today we're looking at the Monster Hunter Wilds proposed minimum requirement, which is i5-10600 or the i3-12100F or the AMD Ryzen 5 3600, 16GB of memory, a GTX1660 Super, 6GB VRAM, AMD Radeon RX 5600 XT, 6GB VRAM. I think there's only a 4 and an 8GB variant, but anyway, you need at least 6. A GPUs that support DX12, 140GB of storage, SSD is required for the minimum requirement, and this game is expected to run at 1080p, upscale from 720p native resolution, at 30 FPS under the lowest graphic settings, and direct storage is supported. Welcome to Respawn PC, I'm Dunk, the hunt is on. Now, we're going to start with the Intel CPU. They put the i5-10600 and the i3-12100F, both quite similar in performance. Actually, the i3 is about 3% faster, so let's say it's exactly the same. But the i5 is a 6-core 12-thread and the i3 is a 4-core 8-thread. Hopefully the game is not thread hungry, but we're going to see that on my real minimum requirement that is coming up probably this week. I've paired that with the GTX1660 Super and obviously 16GB of memory. We're going to play at 1080p, FSR enabled at native resolution, not the upscaling from 720p like in the description, and you'll see why. At the lowest setting, when you enter the game, after loading all the shader that take quite a while to do, your CPU maybe find itself at 100% for quite a while before it stabilizes, loading everything else in the background. So don't worry if your CPU is pegged at 100% for the first 4 or 5 minutes. First off, in cutscene, we have the GPU in the 98% of utilization, which is perfect, using 5GB of VRAM out of 6, that's perfect. The CPU is in the mid 40 to 50% of utilization, and we're using 10 to 11GB of system memory to get an average between 33 to 54 FPS depending where the cutscene is. And when you get into action, like when I'm fighting this Shatakabra something, the GPU is in the 96 to 98% of utilization, which is still good, using 5GB of VRAM still. The CPU didn't change, in the mid 40% of utilization, and same go for the system memory. But our frame rate is 31 FPS, going as high as 34 and as low as 26, with a quite stable frame time. So it seems it really is a pass for the minimum requirement, at least for the GPU and memory specs. For the CPU, using only less than 50% of utilization, we probably can drop even further, but that is for another video. Jumping to the AMD side, CPU and GPU, we have the Ryzen 5 3600, 16GB of memory, the RX 5700, because I don't have the RX 5600 XT. So the closest I have is the RX 57 non-XT, which account for about 10% more performing than the RX 5600 XT. So take into account that we may have 4 to 5 more FPS with the RX 5700. And if you look at the FPS right away, we are at 36-37 FPS average. So remove the 4-5 FPS, we're quite close to the GTX 1660 Super. The GPU is at 97 to 98% of utilization, using 5.4 to 6GB of VRAM. The CPU, in case of this AMD, is mid 50 instead of mid 40 compared to the Intel CPU. For the system memory, we are at 12 to 14GB of memory utilization out of 16. So GPU seems to be exactly what they said. RX 5600 XT should be the 31, 32, 33 FPS average. If you deduct 3 to 4 FPS from my RX 5700 non-XT. It seems they pretty nailed it on the GPU side, AMD and Nvidia. They completely forgot the Intel GPU, that will be another video. The system memory is perfectly fine, at 16 it's the minimum really, and for the CPU we can clearly go lower than what they recommend for the minimum requirement. We don't know if the game is core thread dependent or frequency dependent. We're going to find out in the real minimum requirement video that is upcoming. And that's it for the proposed minimum requirement. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one, and subscribe.